and I'm welcoming you to our meeting today. I appreciate everybody who is here, as well as the contributions you have given and do give on a regular basis. So for today's meeting, I'm going to mute folks, or please go ahead and mute yourself if you're not muted. That'll help with the feedback. But for today's meeting, we're going to spend a lot of time on specific updates that have been going on here in Minnesota. So we've had some great developments, including as recently as this morning on the waste management plan template, something that we're developing for cities primarily, but for anyone to use. And we'll kind of dovetail into a recap of the Green Step Cities workshop that we hosted last April, and something we may do again directly related to the waste management plan template. We have two guest speakers today, and the first one, Kelly Fisher, will be talking about deconstruction workshops that Rethos had held at Rethos and possible next steps related to that. We also will have special guest Simona Fisher, and she's with MSR Design, and we'll be talking about the National Reuse Resource and Matrix tool. We've been talking about it at past quarterly meetings, but now that it's live, it's something that we're really excited to get Minnesotans and others to use. After that, we're going to have a brief discussion about these meetings. This is our fourth meeting, so pretty much 1 year's worth of meetings at this point. And a survey was sent out to folks to weigh in on what they think, how these meetings have gone, what could be improved, things like that. And actually, I'm going to throw in chat for anybody who did not yet fill out the survey but would still like to, you still can. And you can even do this after the fact, so it's not really anything that's time sensitive at this point. And throwing in chat. You don't have to be in Minnesota to fill out this survey. So I do welcome really any perspective. I may prioritize things for our Minnesota specific needs for the built environment to be more sustainable. That doesn't mean that you can't comment. After that, we'll have updates from folks around Minnesota and from anywhere in the world, and then talk about next steps. So a quick opportunity. Feel free to introduce yourself. And because there are so many of you, I would like you to do that in chat if you would like. Feel free to include your name, organization, where you are, and what brought you here. Feel free to include your email address, your LinkedIn profile. This is a chance for you to get to know one another if you don't know each other already. And again, when there are 30, 40 of us, there's a reason why we're bringing folks together. There's a lot of people doing a lot of things to build up a more sustainable built environment. And we just want to have an opportunity, among other reasons, to have these meetings to let you share your story, connect, find people who are working on similar projects, and so on. So feel free to do that throughout the meeting. Go ahead and throw any information about yourself in chat that you would like. So fantastic. Thanks for a couple of you getting that ball rolling. And next, we're going to be talking about topic-specific updates. I'm actually going to be starting with talking about the waste management plan template. Please omit the word ordinance from your memory. I'm sorry that word got stuck in there. This is the waste management plan template. And this has been something we've been working on for about 6 months off and on, and more recently in the last 4 months. So one comment, constructive criticism we've gotten over time is that people will say that we may not be able to have any sort of statewide requirement or regional policies, things like that, if we don't know where materials are going. And so cities had asked us to develop a possible template that they could use, a waste management plan template for construction projects, demolition projects, renovation, and deconstruction work. And that makes a lot of sense. So we don't have any overarching requirements that tells us where materials are going right now. So we should have a plan to do that. And literally, in this case, a physical plan. So we have been developing with cities, with counties, with interested others, people who have the interest to implement a waste management plan. And I see Allie's comments in the chat. We actually have extensively worked with Allie, followed the waste management plan requirements that the city of Nashville, Tennessee has, and learned a lot. And Allie, I'll have to catch up with you another time, but I heard earlier today that our waste plan is very different from yours. And I thought, you know, we started using yours as a foundation. So I'm sure there's still foundational information, but I'll be curious to see if things have changed for you and why. But I know that we've also reached out to you recently through our contractor. For those that are less familiar here in Minnesota, we actually have a not a requirement, a policy, and I'm so sorry again having the word ordinance here, but we do have a goal here in Minnesota that we would like to have 10 local units of government or more adopt an ordinance, hence where that word is coming from, to require a waste plan for certain size structures. For example, those that alter more than 1,500 square feet or more. And again, knowing how and where materials are going, how they're managed, can lead to a much more productive way to incorporate requirements down the road. And so we're developing this plan to help us, to literally help us conserve materials, resources, and energy, these goals that we have at our agency, as well as to prevent and reduce risks for contamination of groundwater from unlined construction, demolition, landfills. Those are very important goals that our agency overall has. And so this is where we're actually feeding into these strategic goals by having this particular opportunity. We hope this will lead to localized requirements, not only for the plan itself, to have an understanding where materials are going, but also to start to divert materials in more sustainable ways. Building preservation is number one, but at the point that waste is being generated, those materials, those unwanted materials, do have to go somewhere. Can they go to the next highest use in a reuse capacity? That does lead to deconstruction opportunities, even partial salvaging, skimming, partial deconstruction projects, that all supports it. But if that's not feasible, can materials go to a facility where they can be sorted and recycled? So there's a lot of options other than throwing things in the landfills, but we need tools to help track where materials are going so that we can use that information to further our goals. So we've been developing this tool since March with a contractor, and we've actually switched formats. We really want this online. Our agency is not ready to take this tool and make it an online tool. And so we started off as a Microsoft Word document. And so, of course, trying to format something that fits in a nice little virtual package was our goal. Based on suggestions from a few folks, we actually just recently, like 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, we switched to an Excel spreadsheet. And so we're trying to customize a lot more and make it user-friendly at the same time, which, you know, I will say Excel spreadsheets don't have built-in user-friendliness, but we've been working with a number of people giving us suggestions on formatting and making this the way we want it to look so that it is user-friendly. And not only am I going to show you our version right now, I actually have a link where you can access your own version if you'd like to look at this, download it, that kind of thing. So I have kind of a working comment version where you can provide comments. You can probably download it and edit it to your heart's delight too. But I just threw the link into chat. I'm now going to share a different file. Thought I had most of these things queued up, but then I found out I didn't have everything here. And by the way, this contract work. Yes.
You just put in the survey again, it looks like.
Thank you. Well, apparently I wanted to share that twice. Appreciate that. I'm so human, AKA make mistakes.
No worries, I get it.
Take two. There's the link, hopefully, for the folder for the waste plan template draft. And so in that folder, you'll find both an Excel spreadsheet as well as instructions, which are optional. They're more for the entity or the city that wants to implement this tool within their jurisdiction or organization, tools on how to customize this. So look at the spreadsheet first. And for those of you who are not going to be implementing it, but possibly using this form, just the spreadsheet itself will be helpful. Do keep in mind that Google Sheets is going to look a little different than our actual Excel spreadsheet version, which I'm pulling up right now. So just keep that in mind. Thanks for your patience. Not sure why it's not coming up. So we've been holding monthly meetings with cities, counties, et cetera. And we actually had our final quarterly meeting, or excuse me, our final monthly meeting with those stakeholders this morning. And so it was a good opportunity to show them what I'll be showing you in just a second, the latest of what we're working on. And seeing that we have our contractor for basically one more week, it's a good time for us to be able to get this sort of final feedback and really hone in on what we want. The good news, though, is that this is really only a starting point, and we will be making changes as this goes live. So I just have to share my screen instead of my app or the device or the sheet. Not everything works the way you want. So let's start at the beginning. We have a template overview for this document where it gives you information about what all these tabs really mean. And a lot of it is informational. So we tried to indicate what's a reference tool, what's a supporting tool, and then what's required. And in the project worksheets, what's required is probably only one at a time. I suppose you could be working on a deconstruction and a construction project, but you probably still would only use one of these at one time. I would imagine anyways. So this is just an overview of what the tabs are. This first talks about what this tool is and what the goals are for this waste management plan. Just a high level. Why are we doing this as an agency? Why are cities perhaps implementing it? And for cities or the organization implementing this tool, anything in red is for them to edit. It states their city goals, their county goals, their University of Minnesota goals, et cetera, et cetera. So it's just a placeholder for what can be edited by the jurisdiction or organization that's implementing these tools. So try to make it really clear, you know, we have other forms here at our agency where somebody can delete the red and enter in the information that's unique for that particular form. And we have a bit of a project background. We tried to make it as high level as we could while still being specific. We received some feedback this morning that we need to have a little bit more specificity to some of the hazardous materials that should be removed and properly disposed of, recycled within projects. So that's sort of just getting the conversation started. At some point, obviously, if somebody's filling this out time and time again, they won't need these two tabs. Maybe they hide them or delete them. And really, the main tabs people will be using are the blue ones for construction, deconstruction, and so on, those kinds of projects. And we're not done formatting. So if you find typos and stuff like that, you're going to. But this is kind of where we've landed in terms of an Excel spreadsheet, again, trying to format it so it's a little more visually user-friendly and being able to capture the information fairly quickly. So project name type, pretty self-explanatory, and basic instructions for filling out the table. We're still finalizing these categories, these material types, but we do have definitions embedded anywhere you see this little red triangle in the upper corner. We have a definition section, but we also wanted it to be user-friendly so you wouldn't have to go back and forth if you're not sure what category something is called. Now, we're trying to use consistent categories that our agency has used or other companies and organizations have used. So we're not going to hit the mark 100%. We know different organizations use different terminology, but at least you can reference back to what our definitions are. So we had 2 stakeholder meetings with contractors. We had 1 stakeholder meeting with cities and counties, and we got a lot of feedback as far as tons versus pounds versus cubic yards. And these dark gray options mean you can actually go back and forth between tons and cubic yards. And there's customization to a conversion factor to auto calculate that information if you choose it in cubic yards, for example. So let's say for this deconstruction project, we have 2 tons of cabinets for reuse, 3 tons of asphalt, and I'm randomly, obviously, making some of this stuff up, and 500 tons of plastic that went to the landfill. Now, if I accidentally meant to choose asphalt as cubic yards, I can go back and forth between that and it will auto calculate for us. Not only that, but it'll actually have percentages at the bottom auto calculated, and again, some of the materials totaled for you. And of course, if you have no other materials, it'll assume that these are the only materials for the project, and the goal is to record 100%. This is right now, as far as I know, 100% voluntary, 100% part of Minnesota, in all parts of Minnesota. So we know that these are going to be estimates, and until there are local or statewide requirements, and until we have a fully integrated online system, we tried to balance flexibility with estimates with precision. And so this is at this point where we've landed. And again, the material types are likely going to change. There may be some that as much as we've vetted, we may still be missing some categories or find that we need to either break some categories out or merge some categories together. So all of the tabs, construction projects, deconstruction projects, renovation, and demolition, they look pretty much the same. So they may have currently draft TBD, currently slightly different material types. And we're in conversation with those that have been giving us feedback about whether or not to have the same list. So contractors wanted unique specified lists for their type of project. Those that are actually going to be implementing these tools would like to have consistent material types, and both make sense. So we just got to talk that through a little bit more and come to a conclusion. Let's see, I'm going to pause for a sec and check chat because I did have to share my screen, therefore I can't see anything else. Comment on units, good to have pounds. We did actually think about pounds versus tons, and we talked to a couple deconstruction companies where they would have like a window or 2 windows, and they would even put it in point something tons. And we were pleasantly surprised by that. We didn't expect that. So not sure how well that'll go over, but we're going to try to start with that. LF, why should I not use that? Landfills, Jackie? Yeah. Yes. Yep, sorry. And I just had to think for half a sec. I believe so. I think that we did certainly have several landfills weigh in on this conversation. So, okay. I'm going to get through the rest of the spreadsheet really quickly. Everything else is optional. But our contractor, Carly, who did speak at our last quarterly, no, she was not yet part of our team. Carly, the contractor for Emmons and Oliver Resources, Inc., came up with a really nifty tool, and it's not required. I mean, none of this is yet, but she created a tool knowing that we're going to have mixed loads, and we tried so hard to not have a miscellaneous category. We knew that if we did, we would have a ton of people just using that for 100% of their materials. We even struggled with a whole row just for garbage and trash, but we did look up the definition and included it as unnecessary or offensive as defined by, I can't remember where now. But we didn't want to have a miscellaneous. And so the way that we worked around that is Carly, our contractor, created an estimation tool by dumpster. And it's just an estimation. Who knows how accurate it'll be, but we know that some visual assessments can actually be fairly accurate. And this is a two-step process. So at the project site, as materials are going into the dumpster or when the dumpster's full and one has a good sense of what's in it, heavy disclaimer on all that, people can list what materials are in that particular dumpster and estimate what they think is the amount by weight of each of those materials. And again, should really total 100% of that dumpster. And I guess, you know, I think people can just write these things in. So this is not like a fixed field or anything like that. But they record what they think the percentages are based on weight for those materials. And then when they get the actual weights back, they can type in what that dumpster weighed, what that roll-off weighed. We still have some terminology consistency issues here. And it will estimate those tons after the weighing based on the percentage. And right now there's space for 20 roll-offs. And of course, one could probably create more than this, but or duplicate this particular tab. And if there are all of those and you want to just add up the tonnage for particular materials, so you can kind of track that at the end of the project, you can do that. So again, totally not required, but a very helpful tool to kind of get away from the everything's miscellaneous sort of scenario that we're concerned about. I mentioned the definitions briefly. Most of these are Minnesota-specific terms. We may need to reference where we got these, but for now, these are terms that are generally agreed upon. And for the organizations that are going to be implementing this tool as a requirement or as a best practice, there may be additional definitions and additional material types that they may want to include. And so we've kind of picked a few that local government and other entities might want to focus on and define those as well. And lastly, we have currently the conversion table in terms of cubic yards to tons. And again, we have seen reports where a single window or door, like a door weighing 100 pounds, you know, 100 pounds is a very small amount for a ton, but you know, it's 1/20th of a ton, and you can get, you know, based on cubic yards, if you broke it all up, you can get an estimation of that weight. So we've been told, we got these numbers from EPA, and we've been told that they may not be as consistent as they should be. And I did have an email from Eric at Vite, who wondered if we could get more realistic information from deconstruction projects, because those measurements may be a little bit more accurate as to whole materials versus perhaps other sources. So this is still a work in progress, and we know that this is important to get right, but we're kind of back to the drawing board to make sure that we have numbers that are legit for this purpose. So again, feel free to download a copy. I'm happy to email you if you would like a copy of it, and presumably you all have my email address. I'll obviously be sharing it again, but I think that meeting the goals of this particular project have been met. And I'm looking for the stop presenting button so I can see you all. What do people think? Do people think that this is something that you can either get implemented within your jurisdiction or you could use yourself? Excellent. Well, I'll take absence or one very cool and one thumbs up is good enough. So yeah, Ted, did you want to say anything?
Question.
Yeah.
Why are you interested in the, I love the forum and I see the amount of effort that's gone into this has been tremendous. I'm glad you didn't ask me to do it. But why are you interested in pounds per item? I mean, why aren't we just interested? Isn't it much easier just to track total volumes? What was reused, what was recycled, what was disposed?
It is true. However, we didn't know how to do it consistently among all the different types of materials. And so we discussed, it kind of went into kind of a circular conversation about the right way to gather this information. And, you know, we had kind of an assumption going in that this would be a fully online tool. And so of course, with an online tool, you can do a lot more customization. You can, you know, perhaps put in, you know, 4 windows at 25 pounds each and, you know, get this information. But without having that online tool, we had to go to a little bit more of a manual and consistent way to do this. So we'll be working up to an actual online system at some point. We're in the queue. You know, it's not a no, it's just a not right now. And so this is our stopgap solution for the short term, or the interim, I should say. Good question.
Hi, Melissa. Katrina with Birch Group. I just want to say that that form looks fabulous. That is something that I could honestly see us using going forward to streamline things. Thank you so much. We absolutely needed something like that. So, but yes, I would like you to email me a copy so I can like really go through it because I really do feel like this is going to help us. So thank you.
Fantastic. And Katrina was able to, from the Birch Group, a nonprofit deconstruction organization, workforce development, she had given feedback and helped us to understand sort of that deconstruction world is not the same as the other types of projects. And, you know, I think we have some room for, you know, standardizing some of the materials where, you know, you may not have this or that. And same with construction or demolition projects. Katrina, I owe you an email, so I have not forgotten about you. So that'll needed to get through this meeting. So just glad to, glad to hear you here. And I was hoping to get a response to you before today. Okay. So a couple comments. Not sure if MnDOT will use it. Totally understand that, Jackie. So the fact that, you know, that you're pushing for it, that's really awesome. That's really cool. It's not meant to be something difficult, and your material list could be a lot shorter and smaller than these sorts of projects for MnDOT projects.
Although we do recycle, you know, lots and lots of road stuff. It's just buildings that we acquire. We're trying to get the contractors to reuse materials, send them to places where they can, you know, but we're not sure it's going to ever happen.
Understood.
And we also have something in our special provisions that actually lets them track it. We put something in our special provisions probably 6-7 years ago. Not that I've ever seen it, but I have seen some contracts with it in it. So that's a step in the right direction.
So maybe we'll have to normalize that so it's not considered special.
Exactly.
Just like the word alternative, and yeah. But that's awesome. Jackie used to work at the Pollution Control Agency a long time ago. She's at MnDOT. We know that MnDOT projects have a high level of recyclability in some of their materials, and I do overlook the fact that you do have buildings that are acquired and need to go away, and hopefully away is literally a better place. So even being aware of where markets are, where possible deconstruction opportunities or reuse opportunities exist.
We do have a lot of house movers interested in our stuff. They probably buy over half of our stuff and it's moved. So it's wonderful. They're doing what we can, and I love that.
And I don't, Hennepin County is rather large, so maybe there are still some structural moves that may need to happen. I don't know if you're aware of our Hennepin County's brand new expansion to their deconstruction program, which does include funding for structural moves.
I didn't know that. I'm thinking mostly outstate. A lot of outstate houses, bought and used garages, sheds, all that kind of stuff. But no, I thank you for that information on Hennepin. It's nice to know.
Excellent, great. Looks like also St. Louis Park is planning on discussing testing out this template in coordination with sustainability inspections and so on. Kelly and Claire from Minneapolis, I sense that you're interested or that you actually have something already for this particular opportunity. Is that correct?
Hi, Melissa. Yes. So the city's new green building policy kind of requires something similar to this already for city-owned structures, but there has been interest among multiple city council members over the past several years on doing more with deconstruction and building material reuse. So we're very happy to see this developed and excited for it.
I saw support from Becker County. So Sandy, within abilities and limitations that she may have within Becker County, may be able to implement it as well. So that's exciting as well. So stay tuned. You know, we are very close to the end of our contract on this particular tool. And again, we will be nimble. We will be able to make changes. We will be listening to the suggestions you all have and doing our best to accommodate the uniquenesses that exist. Colleen writes, knowing the materials and their management method allows us to calculate environmental impacts. That's a really, really good point. And tell us what materials are generated in a large amount so we can work on market development. And even if it doesn't feel like it, we have emphasis on market development here in Minnesota. And, you know, some of these tools will really be able to help us focus in on more specific market development. So Jeff, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, great stuff, Melissa. And as I think you and I have talked about in the past, I see value for the University of Minnesota in a tool like this, and especially with a newly anointed Chief Sustainability Officer in Shane Stennis. This will be something that I can bring to his attention. I don't believe he's on this call, but he's certainly part of this group and monitors everything. So I'll make him aware of it. I just wanted to let you know, if you could email me, like some of the others, the document, because I'm not able to see text chats that are coming for some reason.
Okay, I was going to say,
Thanks.
so you probably can't put your name in chat or email address, which is no problem because I have your email address, but either feel free to email me, put your email address in chat and say template, and I'll get it to you, or somehow get a hold of me, throw out a bat signal. Make sure it's a bicycle though, not a bat.
I'll shoot you an email.
You, no problem. I'm just saying for anybody else.
Yeah.
Jeff, I have your email address and I'm going to just email you and Katrina at the same time. Has there been any cost factor? We'll answer this last question and then we have to move on. Has there been any cost factor analysis done with this proposal if implemented? I will say no. And part of it is because it will be a voluntary tool in terms of who may implement this. So we're not instituting anything at a statewide level. And to some extent, we actually think this will help with actual projects, construction, demolition specifically, but others, deconstruction, renovation. Do people know where their materials are going? Rhetorical question. Do people know what waste they're generating on construction projects and demolition deconstruction? Do they know to the amount of what materials are considered waste? We're hoping that this will actually be a tool for efficiency so that these sorts of projects, the project manager can assess what materials are being thrown away and then start to realize the dollar value associated with that. And there is a cost to transport things for reuse and recycling. There is not the tipping fee of a waste management system like a landfill has. So we're actually hoping that there are going to be some positives for the actual project sites and project manager utilizing this tool. It is a good point though. I mean, it does take time and cities and others can modify this to simplify it, to have more categories if desired, to line up with local zero waste goals or climate justice goals or solid waste master planning. So we actually feel like this actually overlaps with a number of goals right now, where this is a tool that'll help meet those other goals. So not a clean cut answer, but I'm not trying to evade it either, because I know that that's important to know what it takes to actually implement something like this. So I'll keep thinking about that. Okay, one quick last hand, Jeff. Oh, is your hand back up, Jeff?
No, it should be lowered.
That's okay. I don't
Sorry
know
about that.
why I didn't see it. Okay. Anyways, our next topic, going backwards, not forwards, is Simona Fisher, I believe. Sorry. Just double checking who's up on deck.
here.
Thank you, fantastic. Simona is going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to my professional heart, and that's the Alpha Reuse Built Environment Tool, or that's how I phrased it for the slide. Simona, feel free to use your own words, and I do want to say that I have scheduled and already am offering a workshop for utilizing this tool and kind of have it as a working session. So I'll stop sharing. I don't know if you have anything to share, otherwise we'll listen to you.
I do, and let me just share here. It's always a trick to get PowerPoint and Teams to work in the same time and the same day. Okay.
I totally hear you.
So I wanted to give just a moment of context before I launch in to chatting about the tool, since I think I'm coming from a slightly different perspective than a lot of the people on the call here today. But yes, so I'm an architect. With MSR Design, and I've been working on salvage in some projects and getting into the topic recently. And definitely coming at this from the perspective of a building professional. So I want to talk about the new resource that Melissa mentioned, but also just give a couple of slides for context. So the topic of salvage and reuse has definitely been on the radar in the building industry to varying degrees over the past couple of decades of different certifications like LEED certification. And at our office, MSR, we really started thinking about it in earnest when we designed our new studio space to meet the Living Building Challenge PETAL certification. So Living Building Challenge it's a certification kind of like LEED certification, but it's a more intense process with much more stringent end goals. And so, for example, you have to find all red list free materials and find all their chemical ingredients and stuff before you can use them on the project. And because the constraints of LBC required us to find red list free, but also focus on local sourcing and meeting low carbon goals, salvage materials actually became the place where we kind of had room to play in the design. New carpet turns out to have a very large carbon footprint, so we decided to feature the floors, which show the history of the building. You know, they're not exactly refined, but definitely interesting. And we had a lot of debates about moving to a more raw aesthetic that showed that history, but it's almost like salvage became a texture for the project. And on the other hand, not everything is raw. The countertops in the kitchen area are salvaged Italian Carrara marble wall panels that were taken from a renovation that was happening down the street. And our contractor Stahl pulled them aside when they were going to be thrown in the dumpster, and we had the glue cleaned off and the surface reground and honed, and it's not raw at all. It's actually really refined. So it was actually even, I think, a piece of luxury that we maybe could not have afforded otherwise in our office renovation as a new material. But because we were looking at a broader way of sourcing material, we had all of these things available to us. So I think it just made us aware of the amazing materials that are around us, even in nearby building renovations. We learned so much from that experience, but one of the most interesting lessons was that the conversation quickly turned from, we're going to do a good environmental thing, back, like very quickly into basic design considerations. We're responsible for making a functional place that our people are really going to love, because when people love something, they take care of it. And when they don't care about it because it's not nicely designed or functional or attractive, then it just turns into waste again. So all that to say, basically, I propose that architects should be called upon to be drivers of the demand for salvaged and reused material on projects, for the environmental and the civic implications, but also because you can make really great things. And it just has a lot of implications for the design process and the whole industry. So getting to the new resource, we know that cities and the state of Minnesota care a lot about this because of, landfill and the cost of waste management and a number of other issues. Hennepin County is piloting some incentives for deconstruction instead of demo, because they, don't want to be building more landfill space. And I clipped this from a presentation by Hennepin County, just showing the percent of stuff that comes in as trash and where it goes. And of the stuff that comes in as trash, 60% of it is in this category where it could have another destination, including some of that being the construction waste stream. So along those lines, the deconstruction grants I mentioned, I think maybe we've either touched on those in previous versions of this meeting, or we will be talking about them, but there's even a new grant. There have been some grants for the deconstruction side of things for a while, but I'm really excited for the used material building installation, used building material installation grants, because that's where I think there is an opportunity to tap a group of people that could be asked to drive more of this. So in terms of the main item today is this resource. There's a conversation happening in the Carbon Leadership Forum Minnesota Hub. Please email me if you would like to be added to that list. But allforreuse.org is the topic here. It's an ecosystem map of all of the different entities at different scales and from different approaches who are doing work in the reuse sphere. So deconstruction contractors, architectural salvage suppliers, remanufacturing and recycling companies. And I think I might just jump to the website itself. So yes, a number of resources. This map was just launched a couple of months ago. It's a national map. A couple of different organizations came together on it, and there were a couple different versions of a matrix here and a map going around, and they decided to collaborate so that there would be one national resource. It has already hundreds of entries. I know Melissa is working to add more entries that she is aware of in the state of Minnesota, but it is publicly editable and somewhat curated as well. They do review the entries, but you can add, if you know an organization or you run an organization that does work in this sphere, you can create an entry for yourself and be found here. And I don't necessarily have a lot to say other than to just show you this. And I think did the map link already get posted in here?
I was just about to do that.
Got it. All right. And I see a couple of comments. Renee, I can add you to the list. Jeff's comment, can you speak to the cost comparison, life cycle cost related to the reuse of marble slabs? Not at this moment. I'd need to look back at some stuff.
That was a
material was
specific question.
Yeah, but but of course we had to have someone do the refinishing.
Yeah, I guess in general, I was just curious how deep you guys went into analyzing, forecasting costs of, reused salvage material versus new and all the different life cycle components of those decisions.
Yeah, well, I would say we are kind of in our infancy when it comes to those calculations. You know, it being our own project, we definitely looked at costs. So there were some things we decided not to do. And this is one of those that came in where it was just like, we were going to need countertops, and not paying for an imported stone was already a chunk off. So I think this was a win-win for us, but all materials might not be that.
Sure. Thanks.
Yeah, so the resources are categorized by the different different categories of resource. And depending on, so I've been part of a working group that helped put this together, and I think I'm not sure where the next iteration of it will go, but one of the main conversation points was that so much, unlike the kind of life cycle and national and international supply chain implications of material flows today in typical practice, commercial practice, but also residential practice. When we talk about salvage and reuse, it's inherently a local effort. So there are just so many opportunities for the environmental good thing, but also creating really local jobs and industries in the reuse sphere. So it made sense to have a map, because when you are looking for organizations that supply reused things, they're going to be wanting to harvest from local places and supply to local places. That said, some of these things, the network and resources or the different government agencies are actually national resources that we can think about tapping and using. And Melissa, I know you guys are thinking on this scale. And training and education. We had some people from Philadelphia and Indianapolis who came to present in our office at an event a couple weeks ago on circular materials and reusing commercial materials. And yeah, some just really great messages about what is possible in different places around the country. So Melissa, I don't know if I have 20 minutes. I think that's about it.
Well, and I went a little long with the template anyways. So one thing I wanted to point out too, and this is where an exercise that I started in late 2019 of looking up terms like building and salvage and deconstruction and reuse. That's what really started this idea of, wait a sec, there's a bunch of organizations across the entire state, and they're actually literally all over the state. They're not just in the Twin Cities area or heavy metropolitan areas, dense population areas. And so I really wanted to demonstrate as a statewide coordinator that these efforts for reuse, for repurposing, preservation, things like that are statewide. And talking with counterparts in other states, they were coming up with the same conclusions. And there's a few companies and organizations out there that are nationwide and have multiple locations. So some might say that there was a bit of a catalyst with my sort of impatience for not having a tool like this and me seeking that out, showing support how beneficial the tool will be because we don't have anything nationwide at this caliber with consistent terminology or consistent categorization. So it really is solving a couple different problems, the awareness of these organizations. We need to get the Birch Group on here, for example. I don't believe they're here. I'm not even sure if Better Futures is here. And Rethos, at least you're not in the Winona area, let alone the Twin Cities. I didn't check for Twin Cities, but there's just a number of organizations tied to people who are here that should be on this list. And it doesn't take too long to add an individual organization. It does take a while to add like 50, but you can also add in bulk, which is something I keep forgetting to look into. But this is a really powerful tool. Simona, I hope your organization's listed on here because it definitely should. And there's still a gatekeeper.
Look into that, yeah.
Yeah, there's still a gatekeeper. So if you aren't sure, or if you wanted to recommend somebody else to be listed on here, that's something that the gatekeeper can decide, or you can just reach out to that organization and tell them about this tool. Obviously, at some point, we'll be advertising this tool in the more general public. So Hennepin County and Ramsey County maintain separate lists like Excel spreadsheets or websites, hoping to have something that can be a catch-all for all of these resources and make it user-friendly and to some extent customizable via the region. So you can zoom in at the county level or at the Twin Cities level or the Duluth level or whatever to use this tool for your advantage.
All right.
Great. Thanks, Simona. Appreciate that. We have our second guest speaker on tap, and I have an intro slide for that as well. Maybe not necessary, but gonna pull it open anyways. We have Kelly Fisher from Rethos Places Reimagined, who has been a great partner with us throughout the built environment developments that we've had over the last couple of years. And she's going to be talking about the deconstruction training opportunities that existed in May and what it might lead to for future developments. And I probably have used up all my time with that virtual intro to the point where this slide is sort of redundant, but I just wanted to highlight where people can find the workshops with the recordings, and I'll throw that into chat. Okay, well, the floor is yours, Kelly. Take it away.
Thanks, Melissa. Here, I'm going to share my screen quick. Hopefully you're all seeing this. Good.
Not yet.
Not yet?
Now we do. Yeah,
okay, great.
Always
awesome.
a leg. Go ahead.
Thanks. Awesome. Thanks for letting us talk here, Melissa. My name is Kelly Fisher. I'm the Outreach and Education Coordinator at Rethos. And I'm here to talk a little bit about who Rethos is, what we do, and a bit about our Deconstruction Masterclass series, which if you're not familiar with it yet, I hope it's a tool that you find you can use and send to other folks in the area of sustainability, reuse, and deconstruction. Just a little bit about who we are. Rethos is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Minnesota, though we do things nationally as well. And our primary mission is to connect people to places promoting community vitality. So we do this in a lot of different ways. And we have several programs within our organization, but they all sort of center around the idea of advocacy for preservation and restoration of old buildings. Our Minnesota Main Streets program is an asset-based downtown revitalization program that gives communities the framework, funding, and guidance to engage in good community development. Our Policy Institute works on the legislative side of things, working to make building reuse easier and to renew things like the historic tax credit. And then our education program works on hosting classes both for homeowners and for real estate agents in the areas of local architecture and home rehab. I'm going to talk a little more specifically about our education program, as that was the host for Deconstruction Masterclasses, and it's the area that I'm in specifically. But the main goal of our education program is to provide a community and a network of old building stewards, people who care about old buildings and know how to fix them up or are interested in learning how. We want to share tools, skills, and experiences with folks so that they can properly take care of the places that they care about so much. And we typically have two segments or types of classes, I should say. We have our homeowner rehab classes. So these are just general public classes to homeowners or renters that are interested in learning about things like plumbing or plaster repair or historic finishes, or restoring old windows, you name it. We've probably hosted it. And then we have our continuing education courses, which are geared towards real estate agents, but are often still available for the general public. If you're not familiar, real estate agents are required to take a number of continuing education credits in order to uphold their real estate licenses. And so these classes help them fulfill those credits and provide fascinating lectures on things like local history and architecture, racism in real estate, reuse, and deconstruction as well. I think that Rethos holds a really interesting niche in the preservation and reuse world, really looking to marry those two topics, preservation and reuse, in a unique way. And we branch out in a lot of various unique ways as well. But the sort of big things that our education program in particular looks to offer is promoting proactive maintenance. So making sure that folks who are taking care of old buildings have the proper tools to know how to take care of those buildings and building materials so that they don't have to replace them or do as many big expensive repairs. Most of the repairs that folks do in our classes simply require small things like hand tools, so it's very affordable. We want to increase access to rehab information. So we want our classes to be affordable and safe and comfortable and a place where people feel eager to learn and that making mistakes is okay. And so we really strive for that. We want to make sure people have fun and create positive learning experiences. There are a lot of folks that start taking our classes or engaging in our programming that find a huge passion around old buildings and old spaces. And then we want to bust myths as well. So I would probably say that common culture teaches us that newer is better, and we want to help people facilitate their experience in figuring out how to take care of old materials, and that old materials do have inherent value, and that we don't necessarily make things the way that we used to. Rethos has been involved in sustainability for quite a while, and this is just sort of a brief timeline talking about our previous involvement in sustainability and reuse. So in 2011, we became Green Step Cities partners, and then in 2014, we hosted our very first Why Old is Green class. This class we do still offer today, usually once or twice a year as a continuing ed course, but it's open to everyone. And if you haven't taken it, I highly recommend it. It's taught by the wonderful Alyssa Pierre with ADL Pierre Designs, which is an architecture company. And it's just a beautiful breakdown of old versus new building materials, the benefits, the drawbacks, and has tons of fun facts in it. Really recommend it. In 2018, the MPCA kicked off the Sustainable Building Group, and that gave us more opportunities to get involved in the sustainability world. In 2019, we joined Reuse Minnesota, and I saw Emily on this call. Emily Barger's the director of Reuse Minnesota, and it's a wonderful organization that helps different nonprofits and organizations network together to further work in the field of reuse. And then in 2020, we joined Build Reuse. In 2021, we expanded our continuing education classes to include more reuse. So we started our Bringing Down the House webinar for real estate agents, as well as our Reuse for Real Estate Agents class, which Emily also is one of the teachers for that, and we're hosting that in September. So check our website if you'd like to attend that. And then 2022, May of this year, all of those things sort of culminated into this nice project of Deconstruction Masterclass, which I'll cover here. So Deconstruction Masterclass was a project funded in part by a grant from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. And when we applied for it, we applied for a 3-part panel, virtual, that would talk about the social, environmental, and cultural value of deconstruction. It's a relatively new topic to a lot of people. I know that prior to my involvement in Rethos, I had no idea what it was or that anyone was doing it. And so the goal was first to sort of spread the word and make it a more accessible and approachable topic, and then also to have some good, solid conversation between experts where people can ask questions and learn more about the topic. Our intended audience was building owners, contractors, city staff, heritage preservation commissioners, tradespeople, policymakers, but really also just anyone who was interested in any way about deconstruction and wanted to learn more. 3 panels were as follows. Our first panel was called The Essentials. So this was a very broad overview of deconstruction and circular economy, and talking about it as a demolition alternative. I have the panelists listed for each of these, and you'll recognize some very familiar names. All experts in the field, all did a fabulous job presenting on each of these topics. But this was supposed to be sort of our intro to and most accessible panel. From there, the next panel, we moved to climate and environmental impacts. This looked at specifically environmental benefits tied to construction and demolition waste diversion. We had some folks from the MPCA and Better Futures Minnesota looking at the numbers, what diversion from a landfill looks like, what happens to reused building materials, what can be reused, etc. And then our third panel is called Giving New Life to Old Buildings. And this looked at deconstruction from the preservation lens. So how can we tell stories and preserve culture by incorporating reused building materials into new or existing builds? What can it tell us about people in place, and how can we bring stories back? And that was a really wonderful deep dive into the preservation side of things and architectural heritage. We were super excited about the engagement that we got from these. So for all 3 panels, the total registrants were 228 people, which we were so excited about. And then my favorite statistic was that we had 15 registrants from 15 different states and provinces. I was so excited that this could not only be a national but international conversation where we had people participating from all over, because we know there are so many individuals and organizations from all over the world that are working on this type of project or want to know more, and that we could be a part of that conversation was so special to us. And then we have at least 123 views on YouTube and counting, hopefully, and I will show you in a sec here how you can access these panels. If you did miss them, I'm going to switch over to our sustainability page here. Hopefully you're seeing this page. Let me know if not.
Yep. We are.
Awesome, thanks. So if you were to go just to our homepage, let's say you just Googled Rethos, and I'll put the links in here too in the chat after this, you would just hover over About Us and click Sustainability, and then you would scroll down to our Deconstruction Masterclass section. This section is going to have more info built out, context and resources, and just general info about deconstruction over time, but we just wanted to get these up so that you could see them as soon as possible. And you can just hover over any one of these and click the hyperlink to any of the 3 classes, and it'll take you to a YouTube link for each one. They're all right about 2 hours long and hosted by our former education manager, Natalie Hennigan. So please do check those out and share them with folks that you think might be interested, because we really just want them to reach as far and wide as possible. And then I do also just want to show you our classes webpage. So again, if you're on the Rethos homepage, you would hover over events and click classes. It will bring you here. This has the list of all the classes we are currently offering. We do have a few this summer. It's a little quieter, but I promise that we have a fall chock full of classes, and we'll be posting more over the course of the summer. So if you see anything that piques your interest, please do ask questions or register. And then I will just put my contact info up in terms of some sort of all the way through. Cool. In terms of some future developments and hopes for where we end up, obviously we want to continue the conversation and outreach and education around deconstruction. I think there's a lot of progress to be made and projects to work on with the Rethos Policy Institute and getting them engaged on the legislative level to try and push for some legislation around deconstruction. And then we're very excited to be partnering with Reuse Minnesota this fall to be hiring a Green Corps member. And that Green Corps member is going to be doing some tasks for both of our organizations, but one of the things they'll be doing for Rethos is helping to create a deconstruction tool and salvage toolkit, which will help communities learn how to do a grassroots deconstruction and salvage project. So we're excited to see what comes of that. But with that, if there are any questions here, I'll stop sharing. And thank you all so much for listening to me talk for a few minutes here. And thanks, Melissa, for having us. Let's just look at the chat and see. Great. Excellent. Great. Anything else from folks?
That was wonderful. Thank you, Kelly, for that overview. And again, it's just been a great partnership. The intersectionality with preservation and sustainable building material management obviously is quite strong. And so we are stronger together. And so we support each other. That's kind of what we do. And shout out to the Minnesota Green Corps member page because they're still accepting applications through June 29th. They've extended the deadline and they're looking for more applicants for people to become members. And anyone following me on LinkedIn will know that I've been trying to promote this quite heavily just because I think it is a great opportunity, not only just for the member, but for the organizations that host the Green Corps member, for us mentors, for the state of Minnesota, MPCA. It's a great AmeriCorps program.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, Kelly. Back to our presentation. One thing I don't like about having to upload just the presentation is it makes me re-upload it every single time I want to share it. So I'm going to figure out a workaround for that because that's quite annoying. At least it does ask me, do you want to go back to the last slide you're at? Yes, I do. Okay, a lot of folks have seen this slide already, but I couldn't find a good why are we here? Why do we have these meetings image or icon? So I'm going back to a default. We created this particular system map back in 2019. I really had to think about that. I had to think about when we were in person last, when we had our stakeholder work group meetings, and we tasked those that were chosen for the work group to the stakeholder groups to really think about what part of the system are they in, what part of the system exists, and where do we all fit. And very naturally, it can be a circular system where a lot of us are connected together, whether or not we know it. And one of the goals that I think we have, whether it's a more subtle one, kind of an undercurrent, is helping those connections be made and helping parts of the system to support one another. And we have a role at the state of Minnesota to do that, I believe anyways. And so we started to hold these meetings after that work group convened. So that work group was formed to create connectivity and recommendations to change make a more sustainable built environment system. And so of course you need to know the parts just like shown on this screen. And the members of the work group gave us top recommendations to help us change the system. I had to take a brief hiatus when I was reassigned to go work at Department of Health during the pandemic 2020 and early 2021. And just recognized how many one-on-one conversations I was happening with a number of individuals and recognizing how many people were losing out by not hearing some of that same information. And talking with management, it was agreed upon that we could hold these quarterly meetings to be able to share information, provide updates, and allow people to connect to one another. And so we've had 1 year of these meetings, and it really was a good time where a couple of people were starting to ask, what is next for these meetings? And that is actually always a good question, but after 1 year of these meetings, an excellent time for those questions. So I did send out a survey, and again, people can still fill it out at any point. So I will take a look at comments that are received after today as well. And one more time, copy paste into chat. Should take about 5 minutes, maybe less, maybe more. But here's what we have so far, and this is as of about 12:15 this afternoon. So just some sort of intro questions, have you attended? Glad to hear that those that are participating are also providing the feedback. And for those who attended or watched, how satisfied were you with the meetings? I find this extremely high, so thank you for that. And these are copy pastes from the slides, so sorry that the font is a little small, but if you attended or watched the meeting, how satisfied were you? So individuals provided their comments and generally rated us at a 4 or 5 mostly. And I can certainly recognize when things were less than a 4 or 5. We deserve those marks too. So always process improvement here. So now we get into more substantial questions, and I'm going to refer, seeing that some of the actual statements are cut off here. What would you like to see prioritized in future Minnesota built environment meetings? And the number 1 comment or provided was give space or time for individuals to work with others to address. Let's see, I gotta double check I'm getting the right one here. Sorry about this, folks. It's cut off on my version too, so I'm just making sure I'm getting this right. Space or time to allow individuals to work with others to address built environment issues that are difficult to achieve. And that's a really good comment because it talks about the quality of these meetings and not just a transactional or quantity. Do we fill up every minute? Things like that. So I'm hearing that we're going to reflect on that as a planning team. There are people that do help at least give ideas for these meetings at this point. So that is good to hear. Obviously, more guest speakers, people do seem to like that. And I know that people do learn from the people who have been speaking, and space time for individuals to share updates with other attendees. So obviously a lot of other topics are interesting and of interest for more people. And I apologize that there seems to be a couple duplicates here. I did actually modify the questions based on some feedback. So book more guest speakers, and more guest speakers obviously is the same statement. So, okay, I'm still in learning mode apparently. So the question is, what built environment topics are you most interested in? And material reuse rose to the top. I really am glad for that. Like, that means a lot to me, that particular topic, but to know that 92% of the applicants who filled the survey out before noon today felt the same way, that's impacting. Deconstruction, of course, that makes sense here in Minnesota. Strengthening reuse or recycling markets, that is important. And I know that we've been having to build some of the foundational tools for us to start really focusing on that, but that is very definitely, without markets, there's no point in anything that we're doing. If there's nobody wanting to reuse or recycle materials to turn into something else, if the value system isn't there to repurpose buildings, we're sunk. We have no program. So market development is extremely important, and kind of why we've been lending our support to the reuse matrix mapping tool, is so that people are at least aware of the organizations that exist across the state. Getting down to the material level would be great, but we can certainly do that in a number of different ways. So waste material management plans, I'm really pleasantly surprised that that is rated as high as it is, because we have been focusing on it. building preservation ranks pretty high up there, as well as renovating buildings. So there was one other, and the other comment was allowing alternative daily cover, the fines of C&D debris for waste and energy, allowing those materials and waste to energy to be considered beneficial reuse. So definitely hear that, and we continue to talk with our more permitting and legal folks on that particular topic. So thanks for that comment. I'm also pleasantly surprised that it wasn't completely a yes or no when I asked the question, are you interested in helping plan future quarterly meetings? So the fact that there were, or maybe or no, it wasn't 100% for maybe or no. So there was a couple yeses, and a couple people did leave their name and contact information. So I will be following up with those individuals and grateful for any support, as well as structure and ideas. And this is how we do it over here, sort of suggestions, things like that are really helpful. So I see the three of you filled out the survey. I haven't looked at them. I'm just looking at the actual questions themselves. So feel free to fill out the survey. This is open discussion. We have about 11 minutes on this specific topic, where this is where it's your chance to tell us what you would like to see. You don't have to fill out the survey to be able to share your thoughts on this. But if you have routine meetings for other topics or for other themes, related to your day job, and you think it would be beneficial for us to know, I welcome to open this up, and I see a hand up. So Nicole, go ahead.
Sorry, I didn't mean to click on that.
Never mind, no problem. No problem. So especially for those of you who've been around since the beginning, you know, from our work group starting in 2019 or joined us along the way, what sort of things would you want for more support for you to accomplish your goals?
I have a thought. And I'm Elizabeth. I probably joined more along the way in the last year or so. I, over the course of the meetings, haven't heard a lot of talk about grants. And I'm wondering if that is something in the, you know, as folks are talking, if that's more of a networking type of conversation, or if somebody has kind of taken responsibility to advertise when grants are available for projects that involve deconstruction. Thank you.
Thanks for that comment. I think that's a really good one. And especially as I keep getting pinged for the infrastructure funding opportunities at the national level, I'm getting a lot of people commenting about how very much infrastructure includes buildings and structures and things like that. And so there may be more opportunities for funding, and I'm still trying to wrap my mind around all that. And did attend one webinar that was brief and helpful, but not enough for me to feel like I can take next steps yet. So I definitely, whether that's like a small group discussion or something that we focus on, a number of people do reach out on a very regular basis about grant information. And I know that companies that work with glass recycling or want to recycle more glass, that's one organization that I've been sending some of the links to about grant opportunities. But I am not an expert in anything grant related, and so I would welcome other feedback and other ideas and ways that people that are in the industry can take advantage of grants. And so thank you. That's a really good comment. For those that are outside of Minnesota, I'm going to guess that some of you might be connected to some of the other sort of built environment or deconstruction workshops, things like that. What do you see about those meetings that you would like to see here?
Hey, Melissa, this is Kayla Fisher. I'm with the city of St. Louis Park in Minnesota. So maybe while some of those non-Minnesotans are thinking about how they would answer your question or prompt, I'll just suggest that I don't know exactly what this would look like, but I do think at a future quarterly meeting, I would hope that someone from our organization or some of the other Minnesota organizations, cities that are trying to test out using the waste management template would be willing to just share where we're at. Even, you know, as uncomfortable as that might be, like in the middle of implementing the process, and just kind of to that point of sharing some of the things that are going well, some of the things that we're struggling with, and just being open and transparent about that progress, and taking in suggestions or feedback from the group, from anyone that'd be willing to. I think that might be something that would be helpful or at least interesting to folks along the way. So I guess I'm kind of volunteering ourselves for for doing that at some point. Obviously, I don't know that it'd be the next meeting, but I think it'd be great to just hear where people are at.
A really good suggestion. And it does make me think that I did forget to mention, I haven't planned it yet, so it's not all that newsworthy yet, but I am planning on hosting a workshop similar to the All for Reuse mapping workshop that I've scheduled for July 14th. I'll be hosting something similar but different for those that want to use that particular template, and for us to kind of walk through what that template looks like and how would individual organizations implement it. But I think that's a really great idea, particularly in terms of openness and transparency, to be able to kind of do a bit of what I called, or what I wrote down in my notes, as a show and tell on it. Because we know that, again, with that form needing to be nimble, getting feedback from those that may not use the form or is considering using it but haven't yet, that feedback loop will be very, very helpful for implementing that form, whether by the organization that's using it or by a future organization. So very definitely, I think we can accommodate that. And let's work together. I'll message you separately on what that would look like and how to make that work. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds good.
And it's fine if folks just want to think about this a little more. You have the survey link. You can always reach back out with us. And if you have other thoughts on it, I do see Olivia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to talk about kind of the future of these meetings. I think I really liked when the group initially started. It was very collaborative on the problem solving, because we had those specific tasks really laid out for kind of what we wanted to focus on. And I think it's been a good transition to more kind of like program updates from different folks. So I could see, maybe it evolving to similar to how the Bay Area deconstruction work group. It seems like it's heavily focused on updates, but if there was a way to incorporate more of that like problem solving, or kind of be more collaborative too, I think would be great. So a little bit of both is how I see the future of these.
I've been thinking about that. That's all I'm going to say about that, is I've been thinking about that too. I may reach out to you a little bit for a little bit more information and kind of compare notes. And one of the people who actually suggested this kind of reflection meeting is still out on maternity leave, parental leave. And so granted, I want to reach out to that individual as well. Just a couple minutes left on this topic. This isn't a one and done. So feedback loops for even planning this meeting are very helpful. Some of this has been a little extra, I can't remember what word I was trying to say, but some of this has been very fluid and flexible based on developments that are happening and updates that I do believe are very timely for sharing. But strategies to plan this in the future is also very helpful. I just want to let you know, Simona, that there is a leftover question. Thanks, Nicole. There's a question from Annika that she had a delayed question about some specificity as your role as an architect. So I just wanted to call you out on that.
Yeah, thanks. I'm responding.
Okay, great. I was curious for the answer, so. Well, great. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'll go ahead and throw my email address in chat. And so if you do have thoughts on how we can adapt or improve these meetings, believe me, I welcome it. And I don't say that lightly. I do really welcome constructive criticism, thoughts on process improvement, things like that. Okay. Okay, so the remaining portion of time is really dedicated for you all. So again, the survey results do reflect that having time to share updates around Minnesota and then updates from anybody else is a good use of this time. It's hard to believe that we haven't met since middle of March, and a lot of us know some of the developments that have occurred in a regional perspective, but not everybody has, which again is why we give some space and time to these developments. And off the top of my head, I know that Hennepin County has been mentioned a couple times, but I wanted to give some space or time to Olivia at Hennepin County to talk about some of the grant changes, additions that have been made. If you would like, I'm putting you on the spot, Olivia, but I know this is a topic that you appreciate having some space for usually.
Yeah, that would be great. I'd be happy to talk about the updates. And I put a link to our website in the chat. I can throw it in there again. But we've essentially expanded our deconstruction grant program. We're now referring to it as building reuse grants, since they encompass more than just deconstruction. So we basically have 4 types of grant funding: residential deconstruction, commercial deconstruction, structural moves that relocate an entire property, and then the used building material installation grant. So those close the loop by installing used building materials into either remodeling or new construction projects. So our funding ranges from $5,000 per project to $15,000 per project, and that's based on square footage. We just launched this expansion about a month ago, so we've been trying to get the word out. So I can also include, if I can link to a Word document, I'm actually not sure if I can, but we have a media kit with like social media posts and a newsletter. If anyone wants to have that, maybe just put your email in the chat and I can send that to you directly. But yeah, happy to answer any questions about the funding. And our application is also on that website at LinkedIn. So thank you very much.
So residential deconstruction grants, commercial deconstruction grants, structural move grants, and used building material installation grants. And in a newsletter or a presentation, I can't remember which, I estimated that with Ramsey and Hennepin counties offering deconstruction and other material grants, 23% of Minnesotans live in counties that offer grants. Now, it's only 2 counties, and yes, it's the Metro Twin Cities, but that is still significant in terms of population. And I'm hoping that that'll catch on. I'm hoping that we can get some statewide funding someday to be able to allow particularly non-Twin Cities organizations and entities to utilize those too. Looks like there's still some questions or comments back and forth between Simona and Annika, which I'm very intrigued on myself and have a possible follow-up question. But Olivia, looks like there is a couple of questions for you.
Yeah, so a couple questions about where our grant funding comes from. So it's part of our department budget, our Hennepin County Environment and Energy Department, and majority of our department's funds come from the Solid Waste Enterprise Fund, which come from a variety of licenses and fees from waste services that the county collects. So things like the solid waste fees when haulers drop material off at our transfer stations. So all of our department programs and fundings come out of that those revenues. And yeah, so hopefully that answers both your questions, Sierra and Renee. And we have $100,000 in our budget for this year for the grants, and we have around 70,000 left of that to offer for grants.
Fantastic, thank you. Any other questions about that? Just real quick before we go to Kayla, last question for you, Olivia. Is SCORE funding used at all?
Nope, the SCORE funding is separate. So that is, I know there's been some changes in the past year where a lot of it's passed on to our cities, but none of those funds are used for this grant program. It's all separate. And I just put in, they're kind of long URLs, but all the PDFs that go right to the flyers with some more information, including the different reuse minimums for each project to ensure that a viable amount of material is coming out of each project or being put into each project as well. Thanks for all the, yeah, happy to answer any other ones too.
Have you had a lot of people apply for the grants?
So far this year, since the start of 2022, we've had 12 applications. And since the expansion, I believe we've gotten 3, but we've had quite a few inquiries and phone calls and people kind of in the works of beginning their application.
So Ramsey County also offers deconstruction grants. They actually started right off the bat with both residential and commercial or multi-unit dwellings too. So commercial and multi-residential opportunities. So $5,000 for residential, $10,000 for multi-unit residential or commercial projects. And then because the two program leads have been talking to each other, that's what offered an opportunity for Hennepin counties to consider expanding also to commercial as well as structural moves and that reused material grant opportunity. So I think that's fantastic. Kayla.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just a really quick update. The City of St. Louis Park just updated our green building policy. This was something that was shepherded along through our sustainability division, and it outlines a bunch of different requirements that align with the city's strategic priorities and climate action plan. But there are a couple of sections that relate to the solid waste world in particular. And so the new green building policy, which there's not a ton of information on our website about it yet, but there is a link to the published document that our council approved that I just put in the chat. Sections 4 and 5 relate to waste reduction and compost use in soils. So there are some new deconstruction requirements and construction waste management requirements for certain buildings that fall under the requirements of our green building policy. And we're in the very early stages. Obviously, it was just adopted, but I mentioned earlier in the chat that we're hoping to use the waste management plan template that Melissa has been working on to do some of the tracking that's required, or to provide to contractors in order to meet the requirements of waste management plans in our green building policy. So very new, and like I mentioned, it's being shepherded by our sustainability division, but I'm hoping that at a future meeting we might have more to share, or may even have our sustainability manager come and share more if she's available.
Looks like you have some enthusiasm already. I echo that. So I think that's wonderful. I mean, there's a number of different aspects that you're focusing on simultaneously. And of course, we're biased with our support of the green building policies, but it makes sense the holistic perspective you have. So well done.
Yeah, thank you. And I must say, this has been one of those projects that has, it's a result of a lot of coordination between different departments. So while we're super excited for our sections, there's a lot going on behind the scenes, but from, others within our organization. So it's nice to have that collaboration.
I'm pretty sure others can relate to that. It's not easy to get these things developed. Anyone else have updates they'd like to share from Minnesota? Not hearing any. If there are updates that others would like to share that you believe intersects with the work we're doing, no matter where you're located on this wonderful earth, feel free to either put them in chat or take yourself off mute and share away if you would like. I know a lot of folks had to jump off the call, particularly some from other states, so there may not be any updates, but we welcome any information, success stories from anyone at this point connected to the built environment. Well, I think folks are thinking about that. Thanks, Vic. Oh, sorry, Mrs. Question. Did you say if you've decided on the time of the year for the workshop to provide assistance in using this template at the city level? I am. I'm thinking sooner rather than later, Kayla. I'm thinking perhaps as early as late July, early August, because I do want to get this tool virtually speaking, but literally in the hands of people that might want to use it. And so therefore wanting to focus on having something sooner rather than later, especially knowing that there's interest to implement this right away. You don't have to wait for that for us to work together. We can certainly have a one-on-one to work on that. And so then, and stay tuned for when we have kind of a larger group. It's up to you and whether you want to wait or we could have something sooner. So I really do want to work with individual entities on implementation if they want it. So I'm going to be learning as much from you as you might be learning on how to use this tool from me. And so I want this to be a mutual conversation and discussion for implementation. So I need to know how it needs to be more flexible to meet your needs or how you might want to limit things out there. So Simona, I'm not sure that I actually had a question. I think it was more I could have more questions. Like I want to learn more about what it took to get some of these developments happening. And I know that there's been some management changes at Stall Construction. So I did send a separate message, but I don't know if you could see it related to staff changes. And then maybe what resources you have. We've had a number of people very interested in the work that architects and contractors are doing and maybe would like to tap you for the more of that.
Yeah, so I guess feel free to reach out. Anybody who wants to chat about whatever questions we can answer. Yeah, Deb at Stall Construction is a great contact. Deb Aldrich, as far as their willingness to do LBC with us. And it wasn't really a matter of convincing, actually. I think we interviewed a couple of different contractors and they were really on board with just going down that path. So, yeah. And the comment I made there was like, they were actually a fantastic partner. And I think we couldn't have done it without them and without them being on board, because if they had been waiting for us to supply to like find everything and then they find a way to work with it, we would have been much worse off because they were doing deconstruction and demolition on a number of other projects around the state. They said, hey, we've got LED lights. You want LED lights? And like, we've got this marble. Is there something you could do with marble? And we were like, wow, yes, okay. And it just, kind of like I said in the presentation, it really made us aware of what's out there and how much could be out there for so many other designers too. There are a few designers who work on salvage for sure, but I don't have a comprehensive list right now of people around Minnesota. I think a lot of architects will certainly try and reuse some pretty feature if there is one, but this is about a more intentional, larger scale thing. And clearly there's a need for a list of architects who work on that. Should probably go in the resource hub, as you mentioned.
That's just it. Is there are lots of there's lots of separate tools that may feature this and that and certain categories, but I struggle to find one that demonstrates the whole system of the built environment in the way that this all for reuse tool does. And it may be duplicative to other tools that are being used, but in terms of a more holistic and again systemic perspective of sustainability in the built environment, I think it's a great potential tool to be used. And looks like Renee is already making connections. And again, I know that there are people outside of Minnesota that are very excited about this tool, and I'm excited to host the workshop to get more organizations listed. So all are welcome for that. Other suggestions, or excuse me, other thoughts from other built environment folks out there? The floor is yours. And to see who's still on. Katrina, I don't know if you're still on, but we haven't heard from you since our last meeting. I'm wildly curious how things are going for you.
Well, things are going pretty well. We are actually looking to open up a second store in St. Louis County. So right now we're working on closing that deal up, and just multiple properties going on right now, actually in around the Lake Minnetonka area. And also a duplex right now that we're actually working on, which this is actually our first duplex we ever had to work on, but we are actually working on that right now. So we do have a lot going on, keeping my crew really busy for the summer. Yeah, that's about it right now.
I kind of think that's huge. That's amazing. That's fantastic news.
Yeah, I try to stay humble because I don't want to get overwhelmed, but yeah, thanks.
Is it also going to be called a Scrapbox Salvage?
Yeah, so it'll also be called Scrapbox Salvage Company. It'll be a reuse center that's there. And there's actually 4 other like thrift stores and surplus stores that are within a block of there. So it's like I don't know, it's like an antique haven, so to speak, in St. Louis County. But we'll be announcing that probably within the next 30 days, once we get everything situated and ready to go. So pretty exciting, but again, it's humbling.
That's so cool. Having kind of that reuse hub, a phrase that I'll borrow from the Northwest portion of the United States. They use that term on a regular basis, or center, having a place where you have multiple similar organizations together, not only helps in terms of business sense, but in terms of customers and awareness and things like that. So I remember mentioning to Katrina when I visited their Minneapolis location, that they're right next to Bauer Brothers. And what a great opportunity to be able to kind of cross reference organizations and companies when people are looking for something and you don't have it, the other organization might. So I'm not sure that they would, Bauer Brothers feels exactly the same, but I do like knowing that these systems or these organizations are working physically near each other. I think for multiple promotions, I think it makes sense.
Yes, and you know what, and I will agree with you 110%, Melissa. You know, and one reason we did move in that area is too, there's a lot of recycling places are around there as well. So you have the steel recycling place, you have the aluminum recycling place, copper. It's just everything is like within 6 blocks of there. And so too, if there's ever something that, you know, maybe we don't, you know, want within our store, or we can't take it to our store, we would take to Bauer Brothers. So we always try to work with other salvage companies as well. We even work with Better Futures as well. We've called them on several occasions, you know, just to say, hey, you know, we got some things that we think would sell quicker in your store, have a better turnaround in your store versus ours. You know, so we always look to work with others, always. So that's another reason why we kind of plant ourselves, so to speak, in those locations. Just like you said, because we know that there are those customers, we're targeting a certain market, and we know that those customers are going to be in that area, and you know they may just stop by ours. So yes,
that makes a lot of sense, and definitely supports a number of value systems for the built environment as a system and as a circular economy. So that just makes so much sense. It's just so smart. Thank you for those updates. I appreciate you sticking around this entire time and giving us that information. That's exciting.
you are most welcome. Thank you.
Am I missing it, or is the Birch Group not in the all for use map yet?
Probably not.
In process of being uploaded. Okay.
Thanks.
Here's the great thing is that anybody can list anybody else. And so again, I have this huge list of all these organizations that I want to list and or work on a mass upload. And it's important. This is important. The waste management plan is important. I do prioritize these sorts of meetings over entering them, but in order to have the level of awareness of these organizations, I need to make a commitment to listing these organizations that matter so much to making change in the built environment. So it just takes a couple minutes per organization too. So it's not like it's a huge time commitment, but that's why I'm organizing this meeting on July 14th to make myself put some in before then and then do so during and after that meeting. It's also an encouragement for organizations to list themselves too. So it's fairly self-explanatory. It's not like people need a workshop to do it. I just thought a lot of times working together or having an opportunity to kind of collaborate, sometimes that's easier. And I'll admit part of it is for my benefit too. So. Well, any last minute updates that anybody would like to share at this point? I know that we're dwindling in our numbers and people are anxious perhaps to get on with their day. So I don't necessarily mean to keep people here, but these kind of updates are extremely important. In terms of next steps, there's been a lot of feedback shared throughout this meeting, throughout the surveys, and there'll be some time for us to listen and really look into the comments that have been provided. And so I'm so grateful for those that have shared their thoughts and who have provided some feedback throughout the survey comments. So thank you for those. If you really wanted to submit more than one response, I have it so that you can. That was more so people wouldn't have to register or have a Gmail account. Kind of a weird Google quirk. We do have the ability for folks to sign up to receive our monthly updates. So a lot of the information that we share, we kind of reshare through the newsletter, but we also will share some of the formal dates and times for conferences for these workshops, and that'll be where we will be announcing where we have that waste management plan workshop time and date. So we just sent out the last one on June 10th. And it's roughly the middle of the month when we send it out. It's not a guarantee by any means, and we do have to send it to the governor's office for review as of about a year ago, a little bit less than a year ago. So it does take a little bit extra to go through that process. But if you have any highlights, any one of you, feel free to send it to me for possible inclusion in our newsletter and just to get updates in general. So we want this to be usable for you, so you really help drive some of the content or what you'd like to see. And that's all I have. I call this meeting adjourned. Not that I really called it to order, but you all get the point, and I really am grateful for all of your attention and time and all of your good work. So thank you. Thank you to our guest speakers, Simona and Kelly, as well as everybody who contributed throughout the meeting. Thank you.